We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hi everybody, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 21, In Mork We Trust. This first aired on March 15th, 1979. The IMDb synopsis is, Mr. Bickley begins stealing things from Mork and Mindy, including Mork's age machine. The director is Howard Storm, the 13 of 59 Mork and Mindy episodes. The writer is Michael Endler, who didn't do any other Mork and Mindy episodes, but he did the episode called The Gay Bar for Maude, and that is relevant to a very minor character that shows up in this episode. As we begin, we're in Mork and Mindy's living room, and they're having a party. Mindy is doing the spinner for Twister. All of the people fall over, and Mork is on the bottom. Then people get up. There's a guy with a high-pitched voice who says sorry, and he apologizes specifically to Mork for sitting on his face. Mork says, "That's all right, Julius. I do it all the time." And Julius is played by David Wall, who would later appear as a club owner. There's a woman with blonde hair, and I'm going to presume that that's Jennifer because that is the only female guest star, and she has a few lines. She takes the spinner from Mindy, and then Mindy asks Mork if he's all right. He says, "Sure, I love to play Squash the Alien." And I was a little bit surprised that he was referring to himself as an alien in front of other people, but maybe he figures that there's so much going on at the party nobody will notice. She laughs and asks if he could breathe down there, and he says only out, implying that he didn't want to breathe in all those bodies on him. Mindy says she's sorry that all those people fell on him. He says it's a great game, and he suggests they play musical spikes or hide and go kill. Obviously, he sees this as a very violent game. Mindy asks why he didn't come out and say he didn't want to play. He says he didn't want to be rude. So Mork is still learning when to be polite and when to be assertive. Meanwhile, Jennifer has had the other guests play another round. Someone knocks, and it's Mr. Bickley, and the audience applauds, so obviously they recognized him from at least the first, possibly by this point, second appearance that he'd made.
Please, don't get up. They didn't come in that way, did they? That's obscene. Looks like a Christmas card from Hugh Hefner.
It's just a game. See, they're not supposed to fall over.
Left hand to blue.
Mindy says he can't just come in here and start shoving her guests around. Mork says he should at least ask them first. Bickley asks if they know what the party sounds like downstairs. He says it's like R2-D2 trying to do a soft shoe, so another Star Wars reference. Bickley asks what troublemaker was sucking ice into his mouth and then spitting it back into his glass. Julius says, "Oh, sorry." And so this says that Bickley definitely has very strong hearing, or the floor/ceiling is very thin. Bickley wants him to stop putting ice cubes in drinks. He asks, "Do you know what it's like being under 13 people all tinkling at once?" And he's ostensibly talking about the ice cubes tinkling, but there's a suggestion of peeing over Mr. Bickley's head. Mork says they'll try to be more quiet. They can play Spin the Sock, they'll replace the stereo needle with a Q-tip, and they'll play charades wearing gloves. Mr. Bickley tells him to shut up, and Mork says thank you.
Look, I have just about had it.
Hey, don't try to get cozy with me, sweetie pie. I'm steamed. And when I'm steamed, it's no more Mr. Wonderful. I have my rights, and I'm not leaving here until there's no more dancing, singing, laughing, talking, or bodily sounds.
Oh, sorry.
Jennifer says that it's 8:30 and acts like this is really late, and she puts her hand on Julius's arm, and they sort of seem to be a couple, but not necessarily. Maybe they're just friends. People make their excuses and they leave the room, and I counted only 8 guests, so I don't know where Mr. Bickley was getting 13 people, but maybe it sounded like 13 even though it was really 10, counting Rick and Mindy. Jennifer was played by Sandy Newton, who would later do a Happy Days episode. As far as the Julius character, it's not said that he's gay, but there's an odd undertone because he has this high-pitched voice and because he sat on Mork's face. We will never see this character again, and it's possible he's just supposed to be a meek, apologetic guy.
I'm sorry, Mindy, I have to go. I have a self-assertion class. I'm afraid if I'm late, they'll kill me.
Come on, Julius.
Get together again.
After Mindy's guests have gone, she says that they'll have to get together again real soon. Bickley says, "Over my dead body." Mork says that that's a great game, but it takes a long time to play and it gets kind of gross near the end. Mindy says, "Well, I hope you're happy. Everyone's gone." Mr. Bickley proudly says, "When it comes to parties, I'm the super pooper." Mindy calls him the worst and most unreasonable, and he interrupts her and says, "Don't forget cantankerous. That's on his business cards." So he's taking a lot of pride in what a curmudgeon he is. It seems a little bit odd that he would have that on his business cards for his greeting card business, but maybe he's decided that instead of writing sentimental greeting cards now, he's going to write more cynical ones and play to his strengths. He finds a device on the floor and guesses that it's a transistor noisemaker. Mork grabs it and says that it's a radio for deaf mutes, and then he does his pseudo-sign language twice. Mr. Bickley calls Mork a wiseacre and says that it must be a pocket calculator and big deal. He looks around and says this is an incredibly boring party. As he leaves, he says that when you're up here, it's not so noisy. The device is actually the Orkin H machine, which we've seen in a couple earlier episodes, and Mork is relieved that Bickley didn't push the buttons. Mindy thinks it would be funny to see Bickley acting like a little kid, although he'd probably tell his mother to put a muffler on his rattle. Mork says only Orkins are affected by the H machine. No matter who presses the buttons, Mork is the one who goes through the changes. Mindy says he should put it in a safe place. He agrees. One time he sat on it, and he became 2 ages at once, implying that each butt cheek set off a different age. Mindy says that must have been terrible. Mork says he became a Boy Scout and an octogenarian at the same time. He spent days helping himself across the street, and this is at least the second time there's been a reference to the cliche about Boy Scouts helping old people across the street. I'll discuss this more as the episode goes on, but there are some, not quite plot holes, but bad construction going on in the writing of this episode. I particularly have to ask, what was Mork's aging machine doing in the living room during a party? Why wasn't it just safely up in his attic bedroom? So already that premise is shaky. We get a sunny exterior of the Boulder Mall, confirming my theory that we have now moved into springtime. Mindy asks Fred and Cora if they've seen her Mindy necklace, and I don't remember if I've ever seen her wearing a necklace with her name on it, but in this episode she has one. Cora says she doesn't think it's here, and she calls Mindy honey. Fred asks if Mindy lost it. Mindy says she took it off at the party, and she couldn't find it when they were cleaning up. Mork's theory is that it was sucked into a parallel universe, like when you lose a sock in the dryer. He bets that Jimmy Hoffa is wearing it now. The disappearance of Union leader Jimmy Hoffa in 1971 was a standard sitcom joke in the 70s, and so I got that even at the age of 11 because I had been conditioned to know that that was a famous missing person. And of course, the standard joke about losing socks in the dryer. Cora excuses herself because she has a luncheon date. She must go and spray herself with Charlie, and she sings a little bit of the Charlie song from those perfume commercials. And it's nice that Cora's dating, but it's kind of odd as an exit line because there's no follow-up to, oh, who's your date with, or anything. And that's the last we see of her in the episode because she exits to the practice room. Mindy would hate to think that somebody took her necklace. And she says it was cheap, so she doesn't know why anybody would want it. Obviously, it's more sentimental value to her.
All right, let's use our powers of deductive reasoning. Whoever took it had to be named Mindy. Now, who at the party was named Mindy? Slide up against the wall, sister. Move it.
Mindy asks why she would take her own necklace, and Mork guesses for the insurance. Fred suggests they call up everybody at the party and ask if they're a despicable thief. And Fred is obviously being sarcastic, although, as we'll see in the subsequent scene, Mork does not realize this. Mindy says she would hate to think that the necklace was taken by a friend. Then Mork suggests they go to Jamaica to get a voodoo spell put on the necklace, and he does the accent, and it's a little bit painful. Although it does end with a pun about the arms falling off, and so they would catch the thief with their hands down. And Mindy and Fred are amused. We get a daytime exterior of the house, and Mork is doing that air button thing for the phone.
Hello, Debbie Wilson. Yes, this is Mork. I'm a friend of Mindy's. Well, any friend of Mindy's is a friend of mine, too. Listen, did you steal Mindy's necklace? What? I don't know if that has to do anything, but yes, I can blow it out my ear. No, I'm sorry, not raw. Okay. Whoa, some friend.
Mindy comes home and says that she got them spare ribs for dinner, and she puts a little spin on spare ribs, like some kind of accent, like, you know, hey, isn't it fun that we're having spare ribs? She asks if he found her necklace, and doing a Bogart impression, he says that he's still playing detective. He calls her sweetheart, of course. Then he suggests that she can be his assistant and go into the bedroom and put on the flimsy negligee he got for her, which is not a Humphrey Bogart thing. She chuckles and says, okay, Sherlock. Like she's not even aware of what detective impression he's doing. She says when he finds out who done it, he should let her know. He says he found out who didn't done it. He phoned everyone in her class and accused them. That suggests that everybody at the party is from one of her college courses, although we haven't heard that much about how she's doing in college. And she's understandably shocked by this. And then he says he had to widen the search, so he used this book of mugshots, and it's her high school yearbook. One of Mindy's high school classmates is Linda Birchie, who received the Catherine the Great Award for the 4-H Club and was voted loosest and most likely to succeed. And a few people in the audience laugh and get it. I actually didn't get the Catherine the Great thing till the second viewing today when I was taking notes. And it is possibly the filthiest joke of season 1, which is saying something. I will just say it involves Catherine the Great and a horse. And if you don't know, Google it. Mindy says that girl isn't a criminal, she's a cheerleader. Mork says this explains why she just spelled out drop dead to him. Mork called everybody in the book. Molly Berger says hello and would like to push Mindy's face into a Cuisinart. Mindy can't believe that Mork called all her friends. Mork says that he can't believe what they called Mindy. And I thought that was interesting that this connects to the impression that Mindy has kept in touch with a lot of her friends from high school, like Susan Taylor, and I suspect Sally is probably also somebody she went to high school with, although she was not at the party. But presumably Mork called her. One can only imagine what Susan Taylor said, but I would think Sally would just laugh it off as Mork's weirdness. Mindy understandably asks how Mork could do this to her, and he says that he's the one who had to take the abuse and threats. But he tells her not to worry, because no one's going to burn down this house as long as he's alive.
Whoa! I didn't know we had one of these.
Oh, I forgot. You haven't seen one of those before, have you?
Are you kidding? I know how to use this. Watch this, Mama. Meadowlark, check this action. I'm going in for a slam dunk. Shut up! Oh, no. I didn't know it was with litter. Oh.
Mindy says that that was their dessert, and Mork says, oh, happy melancholy. So little pun. I can't remember if this is the first Harlem Globetrotters reference on the show, but I don't think so. There's a knock, and Mork says that that might be the fruit police. And I was waiting for more puns, and it just kind of sat there. So many directions it could have gone with, like pear. Mork goes to the door, but he looks through the keyhole. He asks Mindy if she's expecting a zipper, and there's much audience reaction. He lets in Mr. Bickley, who says, you have some nerve, McConnell. And Mork says she's got a great set of frontal lobes, too, which is kind of suggestive, although he points at her head. Mr. Bickley says he can't work with all this noise. Mindy says, sorry about that. It won't happen again, will it, Wilt? And that's a reference to Wilt Chamberlain. Mork says not until they grow another ball. So another suggestive line that gets through. Mr. Bickley says he's been stuck on the same verse for hours. Mork wonders why Mr. Bickley didn't ask him for help. Mork was at the top of his poetry class.
The other one feeble from Glurm, whose phobos were stuck in her blurm, as she pimpled her quaffed and said with a twaft, excuse me. My husband,
That's good. It's filthy, but it's good.
I knew you'd like it.
I'm assuming the final line was in Orkin, but Mr. Bickley understood it well enough, and obviously there are some rhymes in English that could have fit as well. Mr. Bickley is inspired to change the verse to a limerick, and he sincerely thanks Mork. But as he leaves, he scolds them not to make any more noise. Mindy says she has to decide whether to move to another city or apologize to her entire graduating class. And this is one of those things where you can kind of understand the episodes where Mork feels like Mindy would be better off without him, because this is a major crisis that he's created for her. And yet it's not really dwelt on in the episode. As with Cora's luncheon date, we just move on. Mork apologizes and says he was just trying to solve the case. She says she knows that, and his heart's in the right place. He touches his hip and says that it's still there, so I guess that's where orcans have their hearts. I can't remember if it was previously or later that we find out that they have multiple hearts. Now Mindy notices that the ribs are gone. Mork says if that were true, Mork wouldn't be able to breathe. And of course she means the ribs that she brought home for dinner. They were here a minute ago and now they're gone. Mork retraces his steps, which of course means talking and walking backwards. Mindy realizes that Bickley was over by the ribs, and now Mr. Bickley and the ribs are gone. Mork wonders who would want to steal Mr. Bickley. Mindy has to explain that Bickley stole the ribs. Mork asks why, and she doesn't know. But Mr. Bickley was at the party last night. And Mork says that Bickley had access to her pork, vaguely suggestive. Mork starts to put clues together. Mr. Bickley stole the pork, so it's not kosher. And then he says Shazbot, because Mr. Bickley stole the Orkin aging machine. Don't ask me how he suddenly realizes this, because it's not like there's anything where he looks around and sees that the aging machine is gone. It's just some sort of conclusion he comes to. Mindy says this could be terrible because Mr. Bickley doesn't know what he has. And then we cut to Mr. Bickley standing in his own living room with the aging machine. And then we cut back to Mork and Mindy's apartment, and Mork reverts to infancy. After the commercial break, we get another exterior of the house, but it's at a different angle, so we can see the house next door, which is shorter and light-colored. Mindy hopes that Mr. Bickley will press another button soon so that Mork can snap out of babyhood. So then we cut to Mr. Bickley at his drawing table. He shakes the aging machine, and then he presses a button. Mork reverts to his usual age, and he says at the age he just was, he wasn't housebroken. Mindy says Bickley must have taken the age machine because he thought it was a calculator. Mork hopes that Mr. Bickley doesn't try to balance his checkbook, or Mork could be doing squats with Sitting Bull.
I just can't believe... All right, hon, that was a wonderful TV dinner, thanks. Not tonight, though, I have a headache. Do you know what I'm talking about? Tell you what, let's pack the kids in the car, we'll have a martini, then we'll go to the PTA meeting, we'll raise the flag. All right, that's a...
When Mork is himself again, he says that that was middle age, and he didn't know that he had an attachment for middle America. So that was a little bit of Robin Williams doing a stereotypical, average, middle-aged man, PTA and so on. Mork says they've got to stop Mr. Bickley before he sets it for old age, or even worse, cadaver. And Mindy asks if he means corpse, and Mork says, yes, you should try it sometime. You always said you wanted to see if your nails could be longer. So it's a tasteless joke, and not that funny. Mindy wonders if Mr. Bickley is a kleptomaniac, and she explains that he steals compulsively. And Mork says, oh, like politicians, so a vaguely satirical line there.
Hey, Betty Lou, come on. Let's go down to the lake and listen to my voice change. Come on, let's go for a rip.
No, cooties, cooties,
So we've seen Mork play a teenager and a little kid before, but I thought it was interesting that he goes from girl crazy to cootie fearing. Mork thinks that Mr. Bickley must be doing long division now, and they've got to stop him before he does square roots, and sends Mork all the way back along the evolutionary track. Mindy wonders if this means Mork would go back to the apes. Mork says that there aren't any apes on Ork. They evolve from, and then he turns into a chicken. So this fits in with the whole egg thing with Orkans, although I'm not sure how the test tube part relates. Mork jumps out the window and we see some feathers flying. So Mindy runs out the door and presumably goes down to the yard. Then we get a nighttime shot of the house, and Mindy is in the same outfit and she's pacing. So it's clear that she did not catch up with Mork when she went downstairs. There's a knock and she rushes to the door. Mork is wearing a trash bag and he has a bandage on his nose, and he's being escorted by a cop. The policeman asks if this man lives here, and Mindy says yes, this is Mork. The cop says he thought it was Henny Penny, referring to the Chicken Little story. He found Mork acting like a chicken and running back and forth across the highway. Mindy asks why Mork was crossing the road. Mork says he thinks he was evolving a joke. he had a strange urge to get to the other side. So I thought of the jokes in this episode, this was probably the best. Even though you see it coming, I liked the way it was done, the back and forth with the three of them. Mindy asks if Mork did anything wrong. The cop says he almost took Mork in on a 602, which is pecking an officer, and Mork says that his nose is killing him. Mindy asks what happened to Mork's clothes, and Mork says he was molting. And it turns out that the cop put a bag on him, which is pretty nice of him, actually, as well as he didn't arrest him. Mindy thanks the cop for bringing Mork home, and the cop wonders if this is some kind of fraternity prank. Mork says no, he's just weird.
That's what it is. It's a fraternity prank. Shake the officer's hand, Mork.
No.
Oh, Sigma Delta Phi. I'm Alpha Nu. You know.
Diggy, diggy.
See you around the campus, buddy.
Mork says that the cop is his kind of guy. If I remember correctly, it was at the beginning of the series, as well as on My Favorite Orkin, people wondered, is Mork just some weird frat guy? And so that was kind of a nice callback, and I like the little spin that it turns out the cop has his own fraternity routines. The policeman was played by Bob Arbogast, who mostly did cartoon voice work. Mindy asks if Mork is all right, and he says he is now, but he was sent back to Cave Chicken, and it was really a drag because he had to build fires, and he was trying to hatch everything he could find. Then he asks if Mindy had a baby in the last half hour, and she says, no, I don't think so. And Mork is glad that he didn't do that fertility dance barefoot. So we're again being teased with the possibility of Mork having a baby with Mindy. And apparently that is a very powerful fertility dance because it can work remotely. Mork is holding a grocery bag and she asks what's in it. He says it's the usual seeds, corn, and there's an egg he was trying to hatch. It looks like some kind of ball. And then he has a wig, which he says came off of a woman he was dragging to build a nest, but the good parts fell away. So that's kind of disturbing. Mindy is glad that Mork is back to normal, because this is what passes for normal on Mork and Mindy. Mork says it's just for the moment. If Bickley uses the Orkin age machine again, Mork could be a gleam in some Cro-Magnon rooster's eye. So they're going to go confront Mr. Bickley.
I'm with you, Mama. Let's go. We're gonna make that rat squeal. We're gonna let the cat out of the bag. We'll let the beans fall now. Come on, let's go, let's go.
Hey, don't you think you ought to change first?
I guess you're right. It's kind of hard to look macho in a green plastic dress.
So we get Mork using a bunch of cliches and also the word macho. Although Mork didn't used to care about being macho back on the episode where he said he didn't like fighting, but he's been on Earth a while, he's changing. We go to Mr. Bickley's living room and someone knocks. Mindy tells Mr. Bickley to open up and Mork says, yoo-hoo, sticky fingers, so he's kind of playful about accusing Mr. Bickley of theft. Mork sticks his hand in and does a scan with it. He says Mr. Bickley isn't there. Mork comes in, but Mindy hesitates. She says it's against the law to go into somebody's apartment when they're not home, even if it's unlocked. Mork says, can you honestly say that since Watergate? So that's the second episode in a row where he's using Watergate to prove that you can break the law, which is not the lesson he should be learning. Mindy is still hesitant, but she does come in.
Look, Bickley's working on a new greeting card. See this? To a brave and fearless hunter, whose face is really red, you thought you winged a turkey, but it was your brother's head. Boy, he's got one for every occasion.
So this is what I meant about Mr. Bickley writing more cynical greeting cards than what we got in his first episode. Mindy finds the age machine, and to test it, Mork sets it for 1 second ago. This repeats for a little bit, and then Mindy presses some buttons. Mindy says that that thing is dangerous. Mork puts the clues together, and the necklace, and the meat, and the age machine means that Bickley is a carnivorous transvestite with an age hang-up. Then we hear Mr. Bickley off-screen singing the mother's song, M is for the blah 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 she gave me. They hide on the floor by the couch. Bickley comes in holding a grocery bag and his dog, and he's still singing. And he ends saying, put them all together, they spell mother, and that is always what I'll be to you. There's actually some sweet stuff with him and Bicky in this scene, and he tries to get Bicky to sing as he did in the first Bicky episode. He sets down the grocery bag, but he carries Bicky over to the booze cabinet. He says that it's running a little bit low and he better get back to the old friendly skies, which confirms my theory that he has been stealing booze bottles from airplanes. He's got some surprises for Bickley, which is why he made him wear a blindfold in the doggy department. I don't know why he couldn't just go shopping without the dog, and that must just seem kind of weird, the pet store, a man with a blindfolded dog, but it's that kind of episode. He got him a fire hydrant toy with its own little magazine rack. I guess this is like humans reading in the bathroom, but dogs don't read, and what magazines are these? And he also got him a dog bone to make his teeth big and strong so that they can make the mailman earn that last raise. Pretty harsh.
You Woody? Oh, Bicky, you and I are so much alike, except for the hair and the ears and the tail and the fleas. Hope I didn't give you any. You're the only true friend I have. You know, I sometimes feel you're like a son to me. A sweet little boy.
So on the one hand, it's kind of poignant that Mr. Bickley sees his dog as his only friend and he's like a son to him. But Mork has already offered friendship multiple times. And Mr. Bickley has a son who we will meet. Mr. Bickley wonders what Bicky would say to him if he could talk, so Mork in a child's voice stands up and says, "You're a thief, Pop!" And then Mindy pulls him back down to the floor. Mr. Bickley says, "Well, that hurts, Bicky," taking it seriously as a criticism. And then he gets suspicious because dogs can't talk, so he thinks that there must be another animal in here. As with some other Mr. Bickley scenes, it's not specifically stated, but he's probably at least a little bit tipsy. Mork and Mindy get to their feet, and Mork says, "No shoot, GI, no shoot." Like he's, I don't know, a Japanese prisoner in a World War II movie? Mr. Bickley accuses them of trespassing and breaking and entering. He calls them thieves and burglars. And then he sarcastically says that he's sure there's a reasonable explanation why they're in his apartment. So Mork says, "Let's hear it." Mindy says there is a reason. They came to get the stuff that he stole from them. Bickley asks them to prove it, so she holds up the age machine. And then he says he's not going to take the word of a couple burglars. And then there's a line that sounds like it was looped, where Mork tells Mr. Bickley to cut the canine residue. And I'm guessing it was something more obscene in the original version, and they made Robin Williams re-record over it. Mr. Bickley says if they're so fond of these stupid party games, they can guess. So Mork guesses kleptomania, and Bickley says wrong. And then he starts offering them hors d'oeuvres as Mork continues to guess. Mork wonders if it was for the money, and then he suggests that Mr. Bickley is building a frankenpig out of the pork. And it turns out that the soft drinks that Mr. Bickley offers actually belong to Mork and Mindy. Then Mr. Bickley suggests that they dance, and he dances a little bit while still holding his dog. Mindy says this isn't a party. He says, "Not with everybody standing around like this." And then Mindy is starting to understand, and she asks if he took their things so that they'd come down and talk to him. He says this is hogwash, and why would he want to talk to them when they didn't invite him to their party? Then he admits that he gladly would have slipped a disc to play that stupid game. And Twister isn't worth it, but that's how desperately lonely he is, apparently. He had to come downstairs and play Twister with Bicky, which, again, I can only imagine what that looked like.
Really love that ball of fur we gave you, don't you?
My wife and I tried for years, but we couldn't have one of our own.
Oh, heavy sigh, a dogless couple.
I didn't know you were married.
I lost her in 1966.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Every night I pray the old bat doesn't find me.
So again, Mr. Bickley actually has a son, although it's possible he never had a dog with his ex-wife, and we already knew that he was divorced, but it's possible that Mindy didn't know that. Mr. Bickley says his ex-wife didn't like him either. Mindy says to have friends, you've got to be nice too, and he says that there's always a price. He says that he doesn't have to do anything to make Bicky like him. Mindy says she's seen him walking the dog all the time. Mork has seen him feeding Bicky and scooping up after him, and it's a lot of work. Mr. Bickley says it's worth it because Bicky has never said an unkind word to him. Mindy says it's not that hard to be nice, and Mork says that it's hard work to steal. Mr. Bickley says it wasn't all that hard, especially when it's from someone you really care about. So part of this very dubious episode, he really cares about Mork and Mindy? Okay. Mindy says she's sorry that he felt slighted. And this is cute. She feeds Bicky her little hot dog on a stick, minus the stick. And then she puts her arm on Mr. Bickley's shoulders. She says from now on they'll be the best of friends. Then Mork comes over to the couch and Mindy puts her other arm on his shoulder. Mork says if anything's missing, they promise to come to him first. Mr. Bickley says this is really nice, but then he gets up and says he's not used to this sentimental garbage. He can only take a little bit of this swill at a time, and he orders them to leave. They grab their stuff, and Mork puts a transistor radio down his shirt. He tells Mr. Bickley to come by if he finds anything missing, and Mindy adds that it should be around dinner time, so they all understand this invitation. And Mr. Bickley tells Mork not to play the stolen radio, as he calls it, all night. Mr. Bickley says to Bicky, "Some watchdog you are," and then he suggests that they have a party. In the tag, Mork is doing a drum beat in his head, and then we hear Orson singing an opera aria because he just got out of the shower. So I thought that was nice, that instead of just the usual sounding board Orson, we get a little bit of, his hobbies. Mork asks him not to shake himself dry and calls him your immenseness because last time it rained for weeks. Orson tells Mork to get on with it while he looks for a towel, which means that he's standing there naked in front of Mork in Mork's mind. Okay. And Mork tells him not to tarry, as in terry cloth, and then he does his bark laugh at his pun. He tells Orson about a terrible earth disease called loneliness, and many earthlings suffer from it. Mork knows one man who has to take a medication called bourbon. Even that doesn't help because he can hear paint dry, and of course the man is Mr. Bickley. Orson wonders if bed rest helps, and Mork says no, because sleeping alone is part of the problem. But it's not said suggestively, and then Mork says that loneliness is a disease of the spirit. People who have it think that nobody cares about them.
When children are young, they're told not to talk to strangers. Then when they go to school, they're told not to talk to the person next to them. And finally, when they get to be very old, they're told not to talk to themselves. Who's left?
Are you saying that earthlings make each other lonely?
No, sir, I'm saying just the opposite, that they make themselves lonely. They're so busy looking out for number one, they don't have room for two.
It's too bad everybody down there can't get together and find a cure.
Well, here's the paradox, sir, because if they did get together, they wouldn't need one. Isn't that Zen-like? One hand clapping. Until next week, nano, nano.
So even for a Mork and Mindy episode, I found this tonally weird. There is this mix of tasteless humor and poignancy and just odd jokes, some of which don't quite land. To some extent, it felt like a retread of the first Mr. Bickley episode where he's a curmudgeon, but they offer him friendship, and he reluctantly takes it, and we see a sweeter side with him and his dog. We get a little bit of new stuff with Mr. Bickley, but it's a strange route getting there. Their detective work is weird, and it had been a while since I'd seen this episode, so I sort of wanted it to turn out that they were accusing him unjustly, and so In Mork We Trust would actually be about them relearning that you need to trust people, and then there'd be some switch on that where he did actually steal something, but not the spare ribs or whatever they thought he took. Like I said, the setup for the age machine being where Mr. Bickley could take it was contrived. He's playing with it, and then there's these little comedic routines of Mork being different ages and reverting to a chicken, and all these things happen. A lot of it's without consequence. So I just found it a very disorienting episode, and I would have forgiven a lot of the faults in the writing if it was funnier. So I went back and forth on the rating. I was somewhere between A2, which is the lowest that I've gone, not counting Mork Returns, which is the Happy Days clip show, and so it's kind of in its own category. On the 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well this fits what I'm looking for in this series, and like I said, I haven't gone below a 2 for season 1. There were times when I thought, oh, well, that kind of works, and I was leaning towards a 2.5. I am, for the first time, going to go with 2.25, just kind of split the difference. It's a little bit above average, but they just really needed to rework a lot of this. And I think the fact that it was written by somebody who didn't usually write for Mork and Mindy and didn't quite have the feel of it. He also wrote a Hello Larry episode, not to hold that against him, but I'm just saying the whole thing with Julius was odd, and I'm not sure what they were going for with that. So yeah, 2.25. I also give these episodes a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how much you can ship Mork and Mindy as a romance. And this is also odd in that sense too. We do get Mork as a teen coming on to Mindy, presumably as another teenager named, I think it was Betty Lou. There's the fertility thing. And again, we have them sort of as a couple dealing with their neighbor and throwing a party together and him mixing with her friends. So it's kind of coupley. I'm going to go with a 1.5. It's not super shippy, but I think there's enough. As with the previous episode, I would recommend this to people who are interested in Mr. Bickley, people who are wondering about his cute little puppy, but it's not one of the stellar episodes of season 1. So 2.25 eggs, 1.5 hearts. This has been Paula Schaffner with episode 21. In Mork We Trust. Nanu, Nanu. Right foot blue.
Today is Mother's Day, and we would like to do a salute to mothers all over the world. M is for the million things she gave me. O means only that she's growing old. T is for the tears she shed to raise me. H is for her heart of purest gold. E is for her eyes shining.
Settle, honey.
I means right and right she'll always be.
Bring it home now, bring it home.
Put them all together, they smell mother. And that's what I will always be to you.
The word that means the world to me.
Huh? I like it.
Yeah?
You do it in the nude, right?